Hello and welcome to this special edition of our podcast. I'm delighted to be joined here at Celtic Park by not only a legend of Celtic, but also a legend of Ireland, Pat Bonner. Only one of 7 Celtic players to make over 600 appearances for the club, 641, 80 caps for Ireland, and that's just kind of skimming the surface of what was a pretty incredible playing career for you, Pat.
Yeah, listen, I had all my career here as a player, which is unique, I suppose, in the modern world. But maybe at the end of my career, I could have moved on somewhere. Probably the opportunity didn't come around. But I love my time here. I had wonderful times with a great group of people, players, management, and I think the staff too, the people in around about the club. You know, you built up even, you know, the groundsmen. I was talking to some of them today on my way in. Some of them are still here, which is unique all this time, you know, since I was here. And you build up friendships with people, and it's in your heart and it's in your soul, and it never changes.
I mean, obviously the club is, but when I just look at that backdrop, it's somewhat different to the Celtic Park when you first arrived back in the late 70s.
Yeah, I came over here in 1977 on trial, signed in 78, and joined the club then when Billy and John took over. Jock had just left. Jock signed me, but Sean Fallon also, a great man who was probably the most responsible for me coming to the club. And he took me in here, and it was the old stadium, big stadium with a track round it. Many's a day we played out here, just below us here on the Ash, and had some great games. And then there was the grass bit up at the other end. So it was the old stadium, but a unique stadium. The jungle was there, Celtic end, Rangers end, and then the new stand on that side, which is still there, was there, and the old restrooms and all that. When I walk around it now and I see the atmosphere, I think that the only time I had the opportunity to play in the stadium was when we played a charity match, and I think it was on TV. We played Manchester United, and that was pretty intimidating, I've got to say, when the crowds, and then it was a full house, particularly that day, the noise and so on. I think it was slightly different in our day, even though it was still an intimidating place, and you had to perform, and you had to perform in front of the jungle, that's for sure.
Because you mentioned there about you being Jock Stein's last signing, because one of the things when I've interviewed, for example, Tommy Callahan, he's got that proud boast of being the only player that Jock Stein signed twice.
Right.
and you obviously have that unique boast of you being Jock's last signing for Celtic. But then you mentioned that, you know, another great Irishman in Sean Fallon, who brought, you know, was instrumental in bringing a whole raft of players.
Yeah.
You know, because he was, you know, he could spot a player. And obviously, I'm guessing he had the gift of the gab as well to persuade you to sign.
Yeah, well, listen, I was over and back to Leicester City on trial at that particular time. I was over and back playing in the English Youth Cup. They didn't sign me, thank God. But Sean was going and watching games, and he was going and he watched me play for the Irish youth team at that particular time. And after the game, I remember him coming to me and saying, "Would you like to go and trial, son, over to Celtic?" And of course, I said, "I'll be in touch with your club." And I was KG Rovers at the time. And then, you know, the word came true that he was going to bring me over. I came over in 1977, and I think it was frost and snow, and I couldn't actually even train. I played a trial game for Coltnesh United, and that was against East Kilbride Thistle, by the way. So that was the first team I ever played for, was Coltnesh United here in Scotland, under an assumed name, of course. After that, to be honest, I went then to a tournament in Ruby in France with the under-18 team. And that was a great tournament. I didn't think I played very well, to be perfectly honest. That was Easter time, and I said, "Oh, that was it. That's it, gone. I think I'm going back to school. I'm going to get my leaving cert done," which I was happy to do. And I had my mindset going to Thomond College down in Limerick to do PE. And then the word came through in May that Jock Stein was going to come over, or somebody was going to come over to sign me, and they wanted to sign. And I went out to the Ballyrain Hotel, and now I think it's changed its name, but that's where we went to meet, and I was standing there next time Jock Stein came in. But Sean was the man, and he any time after that, you know, obviously he had left by the time I came over then in the summer, but I used to meet him in the local chapel up in praise the King, and he always invited me down to the house for dinner with his family, and he had that sort of kind of warm handshake. And I think that sort of between his accent, his warm handshake, and the way that he dealt with young players, I think that made you feel that you were kind of almost in the family right away as such. And that probably persuaded me more so than anything else. I felt that I was at home when I talked to Sean, and he kept that friendship up over the years, and his family even to this day. I meet them, and they're always the same. As if you were part of them, and I was part of that as a young boy. That Sean just had that ability.
Because it's that great. I suppose he's part of that great Irish connection that you have as well, and obviously you would have been aware of the strength of feeling coming from Donegal, but as a teenager making that journey to over to Glasgow, over to Scotland, that's a big thing for a young man.
At that time, I was just thinking about coming out. There was no phones in the house. We were lucky. I think we just had a car. My dad got a car a couple of years earlier, but we didn't travel too far. I wasn't in Glasgow before I came on trial. Even though my mum and dad was married in Edinburgh, my mum worked up in Edinburgh, and my dad followed her over here. They were going to obviously going out together, and they ended up getting married, and they lived down in Copeland Road, believe it or not, right at Ibrox. And then they went back over about 6 months later, and we were born in Ireland, and my mum and dad had to stay because of some family reasons. With he'd lost a couple of sisters, and he was there to look after my grandmother, and otherwise we could have been easily born over here. But I'd never come to Scotland, even though we were Celtic supporters. Most of the kids around there were Celtic supporters. They always had an English team too. The next door neighbour had a picture of the '67 team up on the wall. You knew them all. You could name them, but you never really travelled over, and that was the first time. Nowadays it's completely changed. People are over and back on almost a daily basis. We had a flight into Carrickfinn in 45 minutes, and you're in Donegal. I wish I was there when I was young. I'll be honest, I'd be probably over and back to see the games. My first memory of Celtic, actually watching Celtic live, was in Ballybofey in Finn Park. They came over to play in a game there was a tragedy at home, a boating accident. And they came over to play in a game in that. And I remember going up there watching Tommy and Tommy Burns and those guys, and playing in a very muddy Finn Park, I've got to say. But so that was the connection, really. I had a great mate also, Connell, who's no longer with us, unfortunately. But I remember him giving me Ronnie Simpson's book, actually, to read when I was a young boy. And again, all those things made the connection, from that perspective. But coming here then into a city from a country background, because we lived beside the sea over in Burton Port, and you were coming into the bright lights of Glasgow, very industrial city at that time, and coming out to the east end of Glasgow here, that was really intimidating. And I've said it many times that I was very homesick. I had a twin brother at home, I had 5 sisters, mum and dad and my grandmother, we all lived in the house, and I was away from home, and those things were traumatic for young people at that particular time, so I was exactly the same. I missed home, but I loved my football. I loved coming in here. I remember the day Sean Fallon brought me into that first time into Celtic Park, and he brought me straight into the first team dressing room, and the Danny McGrains and the Roy Aikens and the Tommy Burns and the Pat Stanton was there at the time, and those Ronnie Glavin, Paul Wilson, and he made me shake around every player, and he shook my hand. I probably wonder, who's this young guy coming over here? And then I was in the reserves with Peter Mackey and Bernie Godzik and all of Jim Casey, all of those guys, and it was a wonderful, but it was intimidating for a young man. I had to find me position, put it that way.
But it's incredible when you're listing some of those names. As you say, you came in as a young boy, you're shaking hands with Tommy Burns, who's just a young player as well. You become like really, really close friends with him. Yeah. You've got like Danny and Roy Aitken. They're 2 of the 7 players along with you that are the legends that have made over 600 appearances. Your first appearance, I think a lot of people would know, kind of appropriately came in St Patrick's Day, but even then you make that one appearance, which is a great thing. Yeah. You never think you go on to make 641, because that's a lot of hard work over a lot of years, the ups and downs of football to get to that stage.
Yeah, listen, I didn't know whether I was going to make it or not, that's for sure. As I said earlier, I did my leaving cert at home, and I was quite happy to have that behind me. I could always fall back on it. It was something always my mum and dad sort of kind of put into us a little bit to get your education and so on. Some of the girls left school earlier because they had to. There was no money in the house and so on, but we were lucky. The younger siblings, we went to school and we stayed at school and we did our leaving cert. So I always had that. And when I came to Celtic, listen, this was an intimidating place, as I said. Those were great players that you mentioned. Peter Latchford was here, Roy Baines was here. I kind of had an inkling that I was okay, probably in the first year when they sold Roy Baines. I hate to say that against Roy because he was a great lad and he went down to Morton, I think, at the time. And then suddenly I was second choice to Peter Latchford. But even then, you know, I had a contract. I didn't know that I had the Celtic had an option on my contract, which it meant that they could take you on for an extra year when your contract was up. And I remember going in to talk to Billy McNeil one day. I kind of knocked on the door. He was in the dressing room actually, and I said to him, I says, "What about a contract?" And he said, "Oh, we're taking you up on your option." I said, "What does that mean?" Because I can't even remember what I signed. So anyway, they took me up, and that was it. And then continued, and then making your debut. You know, Peter was, even though I trained every day with them, I didn't travel with the first team. We played reserve football. But Peter was going through maybe a wee rocky patch, which most goalkeepers do, and that. And then on a Friday, Billy said to me that he was going to put me in, you know, against Motherwell, which was an incredible St. Patrick's Day. Bobby Lennox, of course, was back from America, scored a couple of goals in the game. There was a very small crowd here, by the way. When you look back at the records,
they were probably all celebrating St. Paddy's Day.
They were probably, but then just to go out there. And at that time, it was incredible because there was a postal strike on, there was a telecommunication strike on, and nobody, I couldn't get in touch with my family to tell them I was playing because there was no mobile phones in those days. So I think it was probably on some of them found out, but it was really on the day of the game that they found out. So nobody was really here, apart from my uncles and aunts that was living here in Glasgow that was staying with, you know, but my own direct family wasn't here, which was a pity, and that. And even at that point in time, you know, my dad was still alive, and that would have been a big occasion for him.
Yeah. Because it's incredible when you think, you know, the way nowadays with those communications, if we've had any young Irish players, if they were to make their debut, then within 10 minutes, the whole of Ireland would know about it.
Twitter's out there, 30 seconds and it's done. Absolutely, and everybody would be booking up to come over and so on. And the problem then was trying to get tickets for them and that. But no, listen, it was a magnificent day to have your debut. It goes down in a bit of history also. I went back out of the team then for a while, and then I played against Motherwell again, I think a couple of weeks later. And in fact, that week, my grandmother died at home. And I couldn't go back because I was playing, which was again a bit of traumatic for me. And I kind of struggled after that a little bit. We beat Motherwell, I think it was 4-2 or something away, and from home, which is a tricky place to go. But I didn't really play that well in the night. And then I was out of the team for a while. And I think at that stage, I was probably didn't know whether, you know, I had my chance, couple of games, did okay in the first game, second game not so good, whether they were going to keep me on or maybe buy somebody in. But I've got to say, thanks to Billy, who you know, I kind of had a love-hate relationship for many years. You know, Billy was like, he demanded of the goalkeepers, but we grew very close and later on, I suppose, when I got a bit more mature and he got a bit older, but it was him to give me the debut and stuck by me. And times probably then when I probably should have been out of the team, Peter got injured then after that, and he put me in. I had a run of games, and then that run of games helped me to grow in confidence, and I think then they could realise that I was okay. But the game's changed, isn't it? You know, would I survive now? I don't know. That's the problem.
Well, that's always the thing. I always think, you know, it's hard to compare with different generations because, as you say, the game changes, but to have made it at the highest level at any stage, you have the right attitude and application and ability that you then adapt to the circumstances. I think.
I think so. I think so. You know, I didn't go into goals till I was 12 years old, really, in Donegal. So I played outfield and I played in the schoolyard and I did all that, and I was okay. But I started going through a growth spurt, and I grew very quickly, and I was probably at 12, I was still 6 foot tall, you know, so you lose your coordination and balance, and you know, with all kids now, that's what happens. And sometimes people make up their mind about kids going through that growth spurt when they shouldn't do it. They have to let them calm down and just get their coordination back again. So I was okay, but at the time the pass back came in, remember 1993, the pass back came in, I was 33 years old at that point in time. I'd been playing similar to, Peter, similar to Ray Clemens, Peter Shilton, all of the great goalkeepers that I remember, Pat Jennings. And we weren't passing the ball out. We were kicking the ball up the pitch, out of our hands and off the ground. That was your sole, job of dealing with the ball with your feet. Everything else was to do with crosses, defending the goal, defending the space, reading the game, organisation, and you built yourself up physically and strong mentally to go out and compete with that. But now the game's about composure. It's about being calm, ball back to you. But the players give you options now. That's only happened the last 10, 15 years. When I think back here when Brendan came here the first time, I think it was him really that started getting, Craig was in goals, and it was almost, he had to take time to get the players into positions to allow him to become effective in that thing. So maybe I could have adapted. I don't know. I tell people that I would have.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Before we started recording this, you were chatting about obviously you've played over on Ireland, for Ireland, but the first couple of competitive games you played for Celtic over in Ireland, well, the first one was while you were on the bench when we played Dundalk.
I was on the bench. It was an incredible game. And we had won here 3-2. I think Alison Eden unfortunately scored an OG to give them a goal. So they only had to win 1-0 over in Dundalk and we were out. And remember, we went on to play Real Madrid, I think, in the next game. And that was incredible. But they built the game up so much down in Dundalk. There was so many people there. They put in an extra stand, and probably a dodgy stand when I look back on it. My dad was up at the game, all my family was up there, but I was just on the bench. And they missed an absolute sitter with about 5 minutes to go, and it was 0-0. And that could have put us out. A ball played across the goal. I can't remember the name of the player now, but he went almost passed into the net and kind of almost miskicked it and put it wide.
Probably haunted them for the rest of his career.
Absolutely, renowned for it. Everybody would bring it up to him for the rest of his year. But that could have put us out. But we got through. I remember the night before also Danny his leg went into a bit of a spasm. He'd obviously the diabetes, and I think the sugar levels went down and so on. So there was all drama all over the place, and that was it. But it was really competitive. And Dundalk were a big, strong physical team. I know some of the guys there. And that was a tough old place to go to over to Ireland, even though the levels maybe of football might have been, but they were physically strong, good pros over there, So that was my first kind of almost chance to see a Celtic team going over there in a competitive game. I went over later, of course, and played Shamrock Rovers in the RDS. Again, another tough game. Shamrock Rovers are a decent team. And we won the game, we went through, and then the friendlies. But I did say to you that every time I went over there, it was always, even though it was a friendly, I felt I had to perform. Celtic, of course, were playing here in the Scottish League. There'll be people over there, as you know, even to this day, it's an easy league and this and that. This is a tough league to play in, and you have to perform. And any player coming here knows that. And they will tell you. But the fans over there, the ones who are neutral, the ones who are Celtic supporters, but they think they're Celtic supporters, think, it's an easy league. And the ones that support the Liverpools and Arsenal and all that. So I always felt, when going over there, that I had to perform. Even though there were Celtic fans there was the Irish fans there too. And they didn't see it on the box too much. They didn't see the Celtic games. That's different now, of course, you're seeing every single game. But then they didn't. So when you went over there, you had to really put a bit of a show on. And I took it very, very serious. Maybe, some fans would say I was too serious. I wasn't, but that's the way I felt.
Yeah, I think fans would like that because that way, fans, whether they turn up for a friendly match or a competitive match, the fans are taking it seriously because you always want to see Celtic win. So when you see the players doing that, I think you relate to that as well. So. Yeah,
and nowadays it's maybe slightly different because they see them every week and they know how they are. But when you play for Celtic, every game's competitive. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Over the years we have gone over. We've played games in the north. We've played games. Played the likes of Shamrock Rovers, etc. There's always a special feeling, I think, when Celtic go to Ireland. Someone once said to me, "There's probably precious few Irish men or women who don't have an affection for Celtic." As you say, some people will have, particularly back in the day when there was a lot more English football coverage than Scottish football. Yes. They'll have an English team. Yes. But there's always that affection, wherever you go, for football fans, for Celtic. If it's not their first team, it's their other team.
Yeah, well, listen, we know the history of Celtic also. It was set up by an Irish man, and it's always had that connection. The tricolours flying here. My uncle always said to me that, Celtic, and when he came here as a young man, way back in probably the 50s, Celtic was a place for them to come and feel as if they could compete with everybody in Scotland and beat them and feel very kind of happy that you were in your own environment here from that perspective. And the history, and then of course the history has been about the Irish the immigrants coming to Scotland and looking after them and all that charity aspect of the club. And that's what the club is really all about. It's not about anything else for me. And that remains and will remain forevermore. So when you go back to Ireland, or the club goes over to Ireland, you feel that you have a connection. And the Irish people feel that they have a connection to Celtic from that perspective. Yes, some of them support Tottenham and Arsenal and Liverpool and that, but they always have that wee feeling for Celtic also. They always, and they're always wondering how they do, how does Celtic do today, that thing. And especially down my part of the world, in Donegal, where, people travelling over and back, and they have huge commitment to the club from that perspective. I was just yesterday signing a jersey for a young man, Jimmy Sweeney. His dad, Paddy, used to be over here and ran the buses. Over there, and Jamie's involved. He's just got 2 kids now, and I says, "Are you coming over this year?" "Oh yeah, I've got that over me now, so I'll be back." And he missed a couple of games last year, and that lives with them, and there's a whole group of people that have that connection over there, and that, for me, that's brilliant in many ways, and to keep that sort of history and the meaning of Celtic alive, that I was sort of kind of almost witnessed through my uncle.
Yeah, because that's one of the nice things I think about is going back this time to play Wolves at the Aviva on July the 29th, an Irishman taking us over as the manager as well, which I think is a bit special. But, to your point about, the fans heading over every week here, so it's nice for the club to reciprocate and then to go over there. So obviously people are going to be travelling from all over Ireland, but it kind of feels like it's home.
Aye, I think so. I've been talking to Dermot Desmond a few times, and I mentioned to Peter, we should have a club over there. We should have a club in the League of Ireland that we and run the whole thing, and that would be a lovely feeder club. Man City do it all over the world. Why can we not do it? I know you've got a connection with Shamrock Rovers through what Dermot Desmond is doing, but buy their own club, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it, for me? But no, listen, the club is special. It's special. It's got that connection with Ireland that'll never change. It's in the history, it's in the DNA. And when you go over there, you feel, all the players should feel that they're going sort of into a country that was part of their history, from that perspective.
Yeah, it's a Celtic country, but it's a Celtic country as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Obviously, the Aviva, we talked earlier about the transformation of Celtic Park. The Aviva's on the same site as Lansdowne Road, but I mean, it's
turned a little.
Yeah, it's a spectacular. It's a very impressive stadium. When some of the Irish journalists were interviewing Brendan last week, and somebody did make the point about the Aviva's going to be hosting the Europa League final this year, and I think he was trying to get him to say, "Well, that's a target." I think he was kind of laughing.
Could be a target. But a lovely target. It would be a great target.
But that kind of showed you even just the venue. It's at that standard to be hosting European finals, but obviously for a game like Celtic and against a Wolves side, a Premier League side, it's pre-season game, but it's good preparation because you're playing a top side. Yeah,
listen, I remember the old Lansdowne Road. I mean, most of my games were in the old Lansdowne Road. It wasn't, a pretty, loose type of stadium, but it certainly was a great stadium to play in with great atmosphere and so on and so forth. This stadium now, of course, is iconic. It's got a design that's iconic. But the great thing is it's in the same site, and it's a bit like here. Well, things have changed here at Celtic Park, and they haven't gone somewhere else.
Yeah, remember there was that debate of, there was possible sites elsewhere for Celtic Park. Yes. But I think when Fergus came in, it was like, well, this is where we're rebuilding it. Aye. Because this is the heart of Celtic. It'll be the same for Aviva.
Absolutely. And when you look around Celtic Park now, you look at the outside, incredible job that the club has done. Credit must go to the directors and everybody concerned that they have spent a lot of money around reinvigorating the environment, you've got to say, the East End of Glasgow from that perspective. Lansdowne Road's a bit like that in many ways too. There was the old stadium was dilapidated. It needed to be done. Players now need a stadium. They need good pitches. That's the other thing. When I look back to the pitches that I played on, I remember one in the league here, and there wasn't a blade of grass on it.
Well, do you know that's interesting, because do you know your point about could players from, say, even your era, how would they compete in the modern day? So if you take any of the outfield players, somebody like Paul McStay, as you say, he's playing sometimes on a pitch where there's hardly any grass. The control he has, so then you put him on a carpet like Celtic Park now, he's going to thrive. Of course.
I suppose the challenge for the modern players, can they go onto bad pitches and play? While we could adapt quite easily because we trained on bad pitches, we played out there and it wasn't the best pitch in the world. But I think that's what Brendan changed here. He came in and he realised that if he wanted to play the way that he wants the team to play, the pitch was going to be a very important tool. And that's what he's done there. So the pitch is immaculate. Lansdowne Road is immaculate. Now the Aviva Stadium, should I say. So it'll be the perfect venue for Celtic to go and play. And then the opposition is a Premier League opposition, which will be a good challenge for them. So looking forward to that game. And hopefully it'll be a full house, which I'm sure it will be. The Celtic fans will travel all over Ireland. And it'll be a lovely occasion. And it's a good test. And you mentioned Brendan going back there as an Irishman. And there'll be people out there, there'll be fans out there to say, listen, Brendan left, and he left in the middle of the season, and so on and so forth. But he is the best manager to fit the profile we have at this moment in time. When you look around and if you're going to make a choice, he would fit the profile. And people have got to sort of understand that. And the game's changed also from that perspective. Players, management, staff, people move and move for all sorts of reasons. You're not going to get somebody that stays at a club 17 years anymore. That's for sure. I doubt it very much. And from that perspective, maybe Callum might get that, but that's a unique situation. So Brendan's back, and he's gone into that, and that's a good start for him for the season. And if he plays the way that the team played in the past, the fans will be happy. If he wins the big games coming up at the very start of the season, the fans will be happy. And then Europe, and people know that Europe is a test, and it will be a test for him too. Even if Andrew was sitting here today and preparing for this new season, I think that would have been the benchmark for him, Europe too, this particular year. So that hasn't changed for Brendan.
Yeah, because those games, interestingly, the Wolves game is the first game back home, I suppose, in Ireland, but it's the first time that fans here get to see the team because they're obviously over in Japan, etc. So I think that there's always that excitement ahead of a new season, so people want to see the team play.
Yeah, and I think listen, we were so enamoured with the way that Ange Postecoglou had his team play, and they were on the front foot. Every pass was more a penetrating pass, and so on and so forth. The intensity was great. We all loved that. Unfortunately, near the end of the season, when the intensity comes off, then they struggled a little bit, I think, from that perspective. Brendan plays slightly different, a wee bit more possession based. It'll be really interesting for me anyway, somebody who still works in the game and has to commentate on it, how that change will affect the players, or will it affect the players, or will they adapt quickly to it, or will he continue playing the way Ange played a little bit more? And of course, him going down to England too, when you think on it, it was a great learning process for Brendan. He had to go in with a lesser team that probably had to play differently. They played more in a counter-attack with Vardy up front and that. So will he take some of that and put it back into the Celtic team and make them better? Who knows? So all of that, even that move down to England, might have been beneficial for the club now.
Yeah, that's part of the excitement of the new season. You mentioned obviously you're a one club man. One other, well, obviously we've got Callum McGregor who came through. He's been here for over 20 years. Yeah. Another player that's been here for over 20 years, James Forrest. And he's also joining you. You're one of a select band of Celtic players who's had a testimonial here back in 1991. James Forrest is against the Athletic Club, who, they make a big thing, or they have an award for one club men. They made a special award for Billy McNeil a few years back, which was wonderful. James Forrest getting a testimonial. I mean, he's an incredible run of success over the years, but it happens so rarely now, so it's a nice thing for him to have.
Of course, listen, when you get a testimonial from the fans, it's special. I think probably in our day, if you got testimonial, we probably needed a wee bit of a boost financially to continue what we were going to do in life thereafter. We didn't get big wages, but that doesn't take nothing away from testimonials in the current climate. He deserves it. It's great to see a young man who stays at a club all his life. That's huge commitment when probably there's other offers there. He could have moved and so on and so forth. James, what I loved about James was to see his development over the years too. When I remember him as a young boy coming into the team, he was kind of in and out. You didn't know whether he was going to really kick on and become a player and so on. But I think, again, when I look back at Brendan, when he came to the club, I think he made a huge difference to James. He can almost made him into a mature player who had a leadership quality within the team when he played. He was much more tuned in to not just the attacking side, but the defensive side. I think he learned him the responsibility that he had when he was playing out in that pitch for the team rather than the individual. And I think that stuck with him. Unfortunately, he's had a few injuries over the years, and we probably have seen more of him. I don't know how many games he's played, but certainly to be at the club all that length. So he deserves everything he gets, and I'm sure he'll have a huge crowd. And that's you're right about the team he's playing. I've heard that before. I've listened to their history. They come from a part of Spain that like to see players commit to them from the Basque Country and so on. And stay there. So that's a lovely gesture actually for them to come over and play in his testimonial, and hopefully Callum will be maybe the next one down the road. So great young players, and the other thing I love about it, to see young players coming through the system. I didn't come through the boys club, or I didn't come through the apprenticeships. I came in when I was 18. Those kids have come right through the whole system since we're probably 11 years old. And to be still at the club and doing well and being some of the leading players in the club, I love that. And that must still continue as part of our history, believe me.
Yeah, because there was, even on pre-season, it was always interesting because you get the other end of that scale of some of the young players making the step up and training with the first team. And again, you're seeing hopefully some of them on the start of their Celtic journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see how it all develops this year, and everybody will be very happy.
I know you do a lot of work with the FAI, but will you be back over in Dublin for the Wolves game?
No, I won't be. I'm on the board of the FAI at the moment, which is interesting. There's a kind of a independent director, not hands-on anymore. I used to be the technical director over there, which was a brilliant job. I'm away from that for 10 years, but now I'm back on the board, and we have a big job to do there. The team, the ladies' team now is, of course, in the World Cup starting now this week, and that'll be interesting to see how they do. So the hierarchy, most of them are out there, so there's no real. So I'm not going over this week.
But obviously, as you say, with fingers crossed, I'm sure there will be an exodus from all other counties of Ireland down to Dublin for that game in the 29th.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy enough to get to. The only problem with Dublin now is so expensive. So you can go up and go down in one day and take a trip out of it. Yeah,
we're looking forward to it. Well, listen, Pat, it's been, as always, an absolute joy talking to you and this time on the podcast. So thanks very much.
Thank you, and delighted to be able to talk to the fans, and we wish them well this year and more success.
Absolutely.